right, good morning.
Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning. I absolutely love morning talk shows. And today I'm going to live out a childhood dream of mine. I'm going to be your morning talk show host. So move over, Robin, move over, Hoda, and welcome to Mandy's Monday Mornings with Mandy. Oh, Tuesday Mornings with Mandy. Yay! Today I have thrown out the slide deck and we are simply going to have a conversation. So I have a ton of guests jumping on this morning and we're going to share insights from everything from mindset to mortgage to value proposition to commission conversations. Because we have a live audience, let's start by getting a little bit of a read on the room. How many people have had to change the way you discuss your value with clients in the last few months? How many have signed a buyer agency agreement where you're asking for 2.4 and then see the MLS commission is below that? And if so, are you looking for ways to better articulate that to your clients? How many of you are not sure what can and can't be done when it comes to financing and all the options available to cover agent commissions through a mortgage? How many of you are struggling with goals that you set over 6 months ago and are either hitting them or not and feeling burned out? Well, then great, don't touch that dial. It's time to tune in. Being able to communicate your value has always been important as an agent, even before the NAR settlement came out in March and we had Martha Ola on contract training in December, talking about how she communicates her value. After the announcement was made, we had Jay Schmidt and Joan the Sheriff Reed talking about value that buyer's agents bring and the importance of buyer agency. These two trainings have been two of the most watched videos on our YouTube channel, and I have both of them back today to update us on how things have been going and what's changed since we last spoke with them. After March, more announcements came out regarding additional legal changes, and things began to look a lot different in the mortgage world. So I'm bringing you Blake from Cream City to answer all your questions around how they are working with clients to get deals done and agents paid in this new climate. Last but not least, I have Steph Minnick from Falk Roof and Gallagher, who helped us this time last year in resetting, reevaluating, and re-energizing your mindset to carry your momentum through the second half of the year. Does that sound good? Great. Well, without further ado, I would like to welcome our first guest, Martha Ola. Welcome to Mornings with Mandy, Martha.
Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning. You know, Martha, I always tell you every time I see you that when I run the morning hot sheet, your name is all over that thing. I think some might even say you're hot sheet.
Oh.
No, in all seriousness though, Martha, you individually closed 35 units and sold over 21 million last year in real estate. In year to date, you've already sold 21 units and are over 12.5 million in sales. Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank you.
How are you talking to your sellers about buyer agent commission? And has that changed in the last few months since we last spoke with you on contract training?
So you want me to start with buyers or with listings?
Let's start with listings.
Okay. So one thing that's really interesting, my listing presentation has remained pretty much the same, but like everybody else, the discussion around commission is interesting. Some of my sellers I'm finding are unaware of the lawsuit and the changing commissions. So a little explanation of that I have to provide. And then some of them are aware and think that they're in the driver's seat to offer a reduced commission. So in those circumstances, I'm really handling those conversations more along the lines of where our value falls as being a buyer's agent, because I set the stage also that, you know, my business is 50% listings, 50% buyers, always has been. And I explained to them a little bit of the role of what it takes to be a buyer's agent and a good buyer's agent. And the offers that you want to look at as a listing agent are from the strong agents that stand by their commissions of the 2.4%. Why would we want to discount them? Number one. Number two, a conversation that I'm having with them also is by reducing the buyer agency commission, you're really limiting the pool of buyers that can bring a really strong offer to the table. Now they have to potentially pay 2.4% of their buyer agency agreement to their buyer's agent. And if you're only offering a 2% commission, they now have to come up with that 0.4%. Where's that coming from? And, that's coming from their down payments, working it into their mortgage. It's very, very difficult. So as soon as I cover that, the conversation changes and they understand. For me, it's pretty easy to talk them into offering a full 2.4%. The thing that's changing for me in my listing presentations is highlighting seller proceed sheets. I always bring that along and we have that conversation so that I can fully explain to them, it's always been this breakdown of what we've been offering buyer's agents. It's only since this lawsuit that it's really been highlighted. And really, the commission has always been buried in your list price. So let's take a look at a potential sale price and what your proceeds will look at a 2.4%, right?
So it sounds like you're really getting them back focused on the net and
Yeah.
away from that percentage that's going to helping find a buyer.
Right. So the seller proceed sheet, along with highlighting the limited buyer pool and the strong offers that can potentially come in, those two things really hook the seller into offering the 2.4%.
I love that proceed sheet and walking them through the math. I don't think that's something I've heard before. You seem really passionate about this, Martha. Why is this so important to you to continue to kind of go for that 2.4% when taking, 50% of your units as listings?
I would say we need to support each other. We all work very hard as listing agents and buyer's agents. I'm also explaining that, a buyer may potentially be writing 4 offers and losing in competition. And that's after showing, 20, 25 properties to these people.
Yeah. And we
So
started with listings. Did you want to hit on a little bit how it's changing your conversation as a buyer's agent?
as a buyer's agent, so just yesterday I had a buyer's consultation. And it's really funny. Most new buyers don't understand who pays for commission. They automatically assume that they're paying for it. And these are new buyers. These aren't seasoned, buyers that are coming back into the market. So really explaining what that breakdown is and really explaining to them what your value is and what your experience is and why you charge the 2.4%, they really understand.
Excellent. Anything else that you want to share with everyone? I appreciate your time this morning.
I would just say be really diligent about providing as much information as you can to a seller, whether it's their first time selling a property or their third time selling. That's not their job to remember the details and how the industry has changed. That's your job. So bring as much data as you can. And, that seller proceed sheet, like I can't emphasize how important that is, really. And then also for a buyer consultation, really standing by your experience, your value, your negotiating skills, and really talking about your production.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha, and congrats on all the success you've had this year. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mandy.
Martha Hot Sheet, everybody. All right, my next guest is flying this morning on assignment, but I did have the opportunity to interview him yesterday in studio and was able to record the conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and share a conversation I had yesterday with Jay Schmidt, since we spoke with him back in March, how things have changed for him. All right. Well, good morning, Jay. Welcome to Mornings with Mandy. Or,
I
if
love
you
it.
were in Boston, I was thinking like coffee with Cotty. We'll figure it out. But thank you for being my first guest. For those who don't know you, I'm sure everyone does, but Jay, you've done over 180 million business over the last 12 months and sold well over 350 units. and your business is up 20% year to date. I wanted to have you on here because in the wake of the lawsuit and massive industry change to commission, you and your team have continued to be industry leaders. And in a quick scan of the MLS and over 180 listings, I see you guys stand firm in continuing to offer that 2% commission to your co-broke. Why is this
2.4, yep.
so important to you and also to our industry?
The success of our business as a team is always, as a listing agent, it's the buyer's agent bringing that buyer to the table. And the good buyer's agents are the ones that know the market, know the right terms to write, appraisal gap, inspection gap, what are you doing, escalators? Like the good agents who are working the market hard are the ones writing the best agents. And my personal belief as the leader on the team, and my team all agrees, why would we discount that relationship? So we are really standing firm on the fact that we don't discount ourselves as listing agents. Why do I believe that I should discount the person that we all really do want to respect, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, which is the buyer's agent? They're going to coach and bring the best.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to be in this industry to hear about what's going on. You turn on the news, you turn on the radio, you open the paper. Your sellers have to be asking you about it. So what does that conversation sound like with your seller and how has that changed?
Yeah, it's, it's come down quite a bit. It used to be everybody was asking. Now that, it's the American culture, we moved on to something else. It's still brought up. And if a seller doesn't bring it up, we are still bringing it up because as we discuss commission in the listing contract, we're fully transparent. So when someone does bring it up, oh, I hear I don't have to pay commission or I can discount that commission. It's a really great point, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let's talk through that. State of Wisconsin is different than a lot of other states that we've had standardized forms. And in Wisconsin, commission has always been negotiable and it's always been transparent in the documents that all parties are signing. So really the lawsuit isn't changing how real estate business has been conducted. It's now the opportunity for some people to think that they can discount commissions. And a lot of listing agents say, yeah, great, I'm not discounting, but I'll discount the buyer's agent. And here's why, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it doesn't make sense to do that. I always use the example of we get an accepted offer, we have an inspection, and the roof is at the end of its life or it's shot, it's leaking. Seller's going to say, well, I'll just give you a discount. And the buyers are going to say, no, I want that roof done ahead of time because that $20,000 roof, I want it built into my mortgage. A $20,000 difference in purchase price is about, I don't know, $150 a month in a mortgage payment. Whereas if a seller says, well, I'll discount by that amount, but then the buyer has to write that check out, what do I want to do? The average buyer wants it rolled into their mortgage. The same exact thing holds true for commission. Buyer's agent commission, they would rather that rolled into the total purchase price. And again, remember, buyer's agents help drive this market in terms of the best offers that sellers are most willing to accept. So why would a buyer say, okay, I'm going to write a check out for $20,000 for my buyer's agent's commission versus just putting in the offer to purchase? What I find interesting is as a team on our buyer agency contracts, we're getting paid 2.4%. So our buyers have to offset that difference. So when it comes down to buyers sitting down to decide offer terms, if they've got to hold money back to put towards a buyer's agent's commission, that's less down payment money they have to drive a stronger offer to purchase. To think it's not being considered when a buyer's writing an offer, the difference was it never had to be discussed. Now it has to be discussed. So what a seller is doing by discounting the commission is reducing the buyer's buying power. What it really comes down to is it should be, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's talk about a net number to you. If we list your house for $500,000 and we're 6% commission, what's that net number? So that when we start reviewing offers, if at $500,000 and 6% commission doesn't net you a winning number, let's talk about that. What could we do to make it better? Do we do some improvements? Do you, and you should have your value add to talk through that with your seller. But what is happening now is, I'll be completely transparent. we're talking about commission in a negotiation back and forth when it shouldn't happen. If
Mhm.
I, as the listing agent, get an offer to purchase from a buyer's agent and it says in there, we're paying 2.4% commission, I will not go to my seller and say, oh, let's try to negotiate that commission down. No, period. Stops right there. The buyer's telling you this is important to put that 2.4% into the offer. So don't negotiate it, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Counter the purchase price if that number is not acceptable to you. I don't
Mhm.
understand where, as agents, we want to continue a negotiation back and forth over buyer's agent commission. It makes us look like cheap used car salesmen. If I get an offer to purchase, if I got an offer to purchase and that buyer's agent said, hey, I'm getting paid 3%. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're now not 6% commission, we're 6.6%
Sure.
commission. What's that net number? Oh, that number doesn't feel good to you. What do you want to counter at? Not,
Mhm.
let's go back and tell the buyer's agent they're not worth that. That makes no
Yeah.
sense to me. So that's the part where don't start. And we're doing, I saw an agent list a family member's house and discount the buyer's agent commission. Wow. So as an agent, you're saying you're not worth it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get that. Sorry, I'm a little
Yes.
passionate about it.
No, I love that. And I hear your passion in it. And we've spoken about this a lot of times. And I think just changing it to framework it all around the net instead of the percentage, you get back to the real reason of why this person needs to sell their home.
Yeah.
And, we've spoke a lot about the part of the listing agent. Now that we're further along in this, we're seeing this more of it be a discussion for the buyer's agent. And have your buyer conversations changed or evolved over the last, 2 months since this settlement was announced, now knowing that you're not always guaranteed that 2.4 if
Mhm.
you're showing a home?
Yeah. It's made me a better agent because, again, you never really had to talk about it. Oh, we're going to sign this
Mhm.
buyer agency contract. On average, I'm getting paid 2.4% as stated in MLS. It's paid for by the seller. Let's go.
Mhm.
Now there is a lot more discussion up front. And as someone who in my 13-year career, I've had buyers under buyer agency with me purchase something without me. And
Mhm.
had never been skilled enough in the past to really drive home that point of, when you sign this contract with me, whether you buy with me or without me, my job is not to be your tour guide and your door opener. I'm your
Sure.
educator and your negotiator. So if
Mhm.
we look at houses for 3 weeks and grandma calls and says she's ready to sell her house, the only reason why you're comfortable writing an offer is because I've educated you on the market. I'm owed that commission because I've educated you on the market. I didn't get you in my car and drive you around town and show you a good time. I
Yes.
educated you on the market. So we're having those conversations up front and much more pointed because it was a rarity that a buyer under buyer agency bought through a friend or bought from a neighbor off, without getting me involved. But in my career, it happened to me, I think, like 5 or 6 times. That won't happen again, because when
Yeah.
that buyer puts pen to paper and signs that buyer agency contract, it's going to be very clear. If grandma calls you in a week and says she's ready to sell her house, I'm earned a commission on that. So there will
Yeah.
never be
And you
that
said you're having those conversations early. When are you having those buyer agency discussions?
right up front. I mean, I want to, because part of the buyer agency meeting is not just to get a buyer agency contract signed, it's to understand their
Mhm.
motivation, their financial position, pre-approval process. Why would I start educating and touring houses with someone who's either not ready or not qualified to buy?
Yeah.
So
And
the big,
in that I'm sure you're explaining, all of the things that you do bring, your value that you bring as a buyer agent to them. You hit on a few
Mhm.
of them, but what are some of the other things that you would explain your value as a buyer's agent, not a selling agent?
Can't give you all my secrets. But really, really, it does come down to that I'm your expert negotiator. I have the market knowledge,
Mhm.
and quite frankly, I'm not in this for the transaction. I'm in it for the relationship. I'm looking to build a lifelong relationship with you guys. So when you close on your house and you need a contractor, give me a call. We do 6 client events a year. You're going to hear from me. Like, this is not
Mhm.
just thanks for the commission check, I'm out the door. You know,
It's a
I'm
relationship.
absolutely. So those are the
Wonderful.
things.
Have you, and then I'll let you go. I have one final question. Have you been in a situation where the commission offered by the selling agent is less than what you have in your buyer agency agreement? And what did you do to offset the difference or to help, your buyer offset the difference?
We put it in the offer to purchase, and it then again came down to we're negotiating with the listing agent over our commission instead of negotiating a net number. And that's the part where you as the seller should not care how I'm getting paid. If I've put that in, is if my buyers, because it's always at the request of the buyer, if my buyer is putting in that 2.4% is getting paid to Keller Williams because of my services, discussion's done. And that's
Yeah.
the part, you have lots of buyers or referrals I get from around the country. What do you mean you're only 2.4%? Well, I want 25% of what would be a 3% cut. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's imagine being in, and that's the part that's amazing. You know who the agents are that are discounting buyer agency commission already. You can't tell me that just unluckily they're 100% getting the sellers who are adamant. No, these are listing agents that are choosing not to value themselves and the buyer's agent.
Yeah.
And
Well, I just want to thank you for not only your time today, but your passion in this and leading the way, being, who you are and who your team is and the reputation you guys have. And it's in the numbers. You're up 20%. You haven't faltered in offering that co-broke commission. And I know you've said it time and time again that you will fall on the sword if need be for this. And we appreciate your leadership and you taking the time to jump on this morning. So thank you
just
so much.
when I sell my personal house in Mequon, watch what the buyer agent commission offering is going to be. I can tell you it ain't going to be 2.4%. It's going to be higher.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Martha. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to jump on and share your insights with that. We talk a lot about what's happening from the listing side of things when it comes to commission changes happening in August, but we all know there's a whole nother side to that table. So when I was asking around and interviewing agents in the office, there seemed to be a lot of unknowns still about how you handle it as a buyer's agent in defending your commission. And so my next guest, it's not a commercial, it's not a paid ad, so don't change that channel. It's Blake Early from Cream City Mortgage. Blake, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Mornings with Mandy. It's good to
Happy
see
to
you.
be here. Yeah.
All right, Blake. So I'm hoping that you can kind of clear up some of the questions that I get on a daily basis, and I'm sure a lot of our agents are getting from their clients.
Yeah.
There have been changes with how buyers can use incentives and credits and all of these different things. Can you fill us in a little bit on how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's important to kind of take a step back on how seller concessions work, because I saw something circulating about like interested party contributions, IPCs. So a lot of times I'll get a call from a buyer agent saying, hey, what are the closing costs so I can get a credit for my buyer? Well, the answer is you're allowed to get certain credits up to a certain percentage of the purchase price, depending on the down payment amount. So if your buyer is doing 10% or less down, they can get up to 3% of the purchase price as a credit. So if they're buying a $300,000 house, they can get $9,000 worth of credits. Okay. And that's always the case. If the buyer has, say, only $5,000 worth of closing costs, then we can use that other $4,000 to buy down the interest rate because that's a cost. So you can use up that full $9,000 there. So that's what an IPC is. It's actually an interested party contribution. It's actually a percentage of the purchase price. Okay, that's kind of important to know. What Fannie and Freddie have said, it was like a month or a month or two ago, they said it's always been customary for the seller to basically pay for the buyer agent's commissions. We're not going to get in the way of that. If there is a seller credit that's going to go above and beyond that IPC amount, that's fine. We don't care. It's not going to go towards that 3% or 6% or 9%, whatever it is. So that's what Fannie and Freddie said about getting seller credits to cover buyer agency fees. That's kind of the big thing. That's where they stepped in and contributed some sort of authority.
And
Now
there
in
was,
regards to
some back and forth there. I mean, I read your monthly newsletter. It's great. I know that you look into a crystal ball a lot of the time and people ask you to do that. Do you perceive that there's going to be any more changes to what Freddie and Fannie are saying before August 15th?
I personally don't believe so, or if they do, it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. The reason I say that is because the regulators of the mortgage business, like the FTC, the CFPB, FHFA, HUD, all of them, TRID especially, their primary focus is the buyer's best interest, and they regulate disclosures. They regulate our commissions very heavily. I don't think they're going to step in and say, hey, it's okay to now finance a commission, especially since it's not even a loan officer's, it's an agent's. I don't think they're going to say that they can directly finance an agent's commission. Because essentially you're adding a cost to the buyer. And like Martha and Jay alluded to earlier, it's a cost to the buyer. It reduces their purchasing power.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're seeing or any changes to the buyer agency agreement that are helping, more offers get accepted that you're kind of helping with that agents should be, learning from?
I've seen a couple changes to the agreement. Mostly if the buyer agency fee is going to be less than the standard, whatever, 2.4, say the seller's offering 2%. I've seen a couple contracts now where the buyer agent will write in 2% plus the buyer will cover the difference between that 2% and what my fee is. We've seen that a couple times. I would say most importantly for all you agents out there, all the buyer agents, is because this is all relatively new to everybody, especially lenders, we're not used to seeing this sort of stuff. When you get a buyer agency agreement that's got some sort of different verbiage, just ping your loan officer, let them know so we can add to the disclosures and there's no confusion or hiccups at the closing table. The buyer's not saying, oh crap, now I have to write a $1,500 check, like they forgot about it. We just want to get ahead of it ahead of time. And we're just not used to seeing that. So just let us know.
Excellent. If people do want to reach out to you or are unclear on, specific scenarios, how can they reach you, Blake?
They can email me, blake@creamcitymortgage.com, or call or text 248-229-7799.
Need a little ticker. Should have been
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, it's an easy phone number.
Thank you so much, Blake, and your
Yeah, of
team. You
course.
guys are fantastic to work with. Appreciate you jumping on to clear some of this up.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Mandy.
All right, my last guest this morning wears so many hats and wears them all extremely well. And not only is she a top producer and a member of our ALC and a MAPS coach, but she's an all-around phenomenal woman. Steph, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Mornings with Mandy. Good morning.
Hi, Mandy, I feel like you need a jingle for next time. Some sort of theme.
I know Willis is out of town this week. This is very low budget. All right. So I had the privilege of speaking with Steph last week, and we were talking a lot about being stuck with your goals, and you set goals at the beginning of the year when you're all excited, and then you kind of get a little stuck. So how to get unstuck. And I read a quote by author Brianna West that really talked a lot about what Steph and I were talking about over really good croissants. Sometimes running into a wall does not mean you need to be strong enough to push through it, but you need to be wise enough to see that there is another way. So Steph's going to walk us through a little bit of an exercise this morning, and I want you guys to be all in on this to help you kind of get re-energized and refocused to finish out the year strong, whether it means continuing with the original goals you set or just throwing them out completely and starting new. So Steph, I'm going to hand the mic over to you to help us through this exercise this morning, and I'm going to participate as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask, could you guys do me a small favor and just put your phones screen down? If you're on Zoom, I'd love to see your faces. I see a lot of people off camera. And if you have a browser up, just give yourself, close that out and just give yourself 10 minutes today to just be focused and all in and do some reflection. we're going to take a little bit of a reset, and that's just a pause, right? A little check-in on your world. And as we talk about some numbers today, I want you to remember and give yourself permission to just be super neutral about the numbers, right? Numbers are facts, and it's our emotions that gives them charge, right? If you can at all, write with pen and paper for these exercises, because there is something, I don't know, brain-like that just reinforces when you write with pen and paper. So today we're going to take on the role of an engineer and an artist. We're going to be kind of use both sides of our brains today. And think about the engineer. We're building a factory, right? How big is the factory? How much load can it carry? What are we making? Like, how many widgets can we make in an hour or in a year? And then the artist that's the side that's going to say, well, why is that important? And what makes that beautiful, right? And what do we benefit from with this factory? So we're going to kind of use both sides of our brains today. So the first thing we're going to do is just take a pause and reflect on that first 6.5 months of this year. So we go all the way back to January through today. And what went well? And I'd love for you to write down like 2 to 3 things. If there's more, write them down. If you're in Zoom, I'd love to see in the chat for you guys to share some of your wins, and we can all celebrate that. So just include like 2 to 3 things, and make sure there's some personal stuff in there too. And then once you have your wins, let's think about, just imagine we're back on January 1st, and many of you set goals in the fall or maybe on New Year's Eve, and think about that goal that you set for yourself, whether it was a unit goal, a GCI goal, a volume goal. Maybe it was something about building, right? Adding leverage to your world. Maybe there was a personal goal you wanted to hit. Think back to that, and I want you to reflect on what was important about that goal. And when you achieve that goal, what would that do for you? And if you're on screen and you've got those, just give me like a little nod or look up when you're ready, so I know you've had enough time. Mandy, you can maybe help me gauge the room too.
Pens are still down in studio.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna first kind of go into our engineer side, and we're gonna start with that goal. And I want you to pull up a couple numbers, and hopefully you have just a general idea of this or have an access to it somewhere. But we're gonna do a just back of the napkin gap analysis exercise. And if there's ever someone who wants an opportunity to go deeper on this, you can always reach out to me, but we're gonna keep it super simple today for Tuesday morning. And we're just gonna take what your goal is for the year. This is ideally, unit count's gonna be easiest. If you have your GCI, that's cool too. But think of what was your goal number of units that you wanted to close total. Subtract out everything that's closed already. So if I had a unit goal of 20 sales this year and I've sold 8, I'm left with 12. Then I want you to subtract out anything you have under contract right now, right? So we're going to take your closed and pended deals, closed and accepted offers, and subtract them from your goal. And whatever we have left, that's our gap. It's as simple as that, right? We don't need a whole worksheet for this. It's pretty easy. So again, if you're in the chat, I'd love to see any numbers, or maybe, man, you can get 1 or 2 shout outs. How many units do we have left in our gaps?
$15.
Okay. One more. All right, we've got a 12. Awesome. Okay, so we've got 15 and 12 so far, and maybe your numbers are similar or totally different. We've got a 4 in the chat. So now what I want you to remember is while we have like 5.5 months left, right, of the year, we really only have 18 weeks, right? Because we know that we want to have everything pended before mid-November if we're planning for this unit or this GCI to close still this year. And so there's 18 weeks through from today through the middle of November. So we want to take that unit gap or that GCI gap, and we're going to divide it by 18. And that's what we need to do every week. We could also adjust this because we know from all of our team meetings that units and GCI and closings, those are lagging indicators, right? That's the result of an activity. So we can also back into this and really kind of decide, I'm going to focus on the leading indicator, the top of the funnel, and focus on the activity that's going to get me that result. So for example, you may have your own conversion rates. You may know, hey, if I book this many appointments, I will convert this many contracts into sales. If you track your numbers, the path is in the math. That's the beautiful thing about tracking. If you don't, I'm going to give you the math that MAPS uses for their clients who aren't yet aware of their numbers. And so that says for every 2 appointments, I'm going to get 1 contract. So if we've got a 12 in the chat, so for that 12 units, if we're following MAPS math, we need to have 24 appointments in the next 18 weeks to rely on those things ideally closing, right? And we may need to kind of front load some of that as well. They're also saying we might need 60 contacts, right? 60 two-way conversations for 1 appointment. So we can use some of that math to best determine what is the activity that I can control that will get me the result I'm looking for. All right, so when you divide that, whether it's the units, the GCI, or the activities by 18 weeks, I want you to think about, like, how does that feel to me? Does that number feel doable, right? Or is that number really scary? How does that compare to what we've done this year so far? Who feels scared about their goal, about the number, or a little nervous or excited? Anyone? Any hands?
Got hands.
Okay. And then who's like, I've totally got this, count me in, I might change my goal and make it bigger. Any hands there?
No hands.
Okay. All right, so that's going to help me gauge our conversation. So again, then let's think about, okay, for those of you who had 15 or 12 units, well, we've all likely have a pipeline, right? So how many of those deals are in your pipeline? Think about the people you've been working with, the people you're meeting and doing home prep with, the buyers you've been out showing. How many deals do you think you feel confident could close yet in Q3 and Q4? And then we know how many new buyers we've got to go find, right? So it's not as big as we think if we've got this pipeline that we've been nurturing. All right. And then what I want you to do is think about between now and the end of the year, and are there any trips or conflicts if you're going to mega camp for a week, if you've got a vacation before school starts, like what's going on in your personal world that we may need to work around, right? Maybe it's not 18 weeks, but it's 17 or 16 that we should really be factoring. All right, so that's the engineer part, right? That's the path is in the math. Let's figure out what we need to do. And yet that's really only one side of the coin, right? Because I want you to step back and switch gears into this artist side. And I want you to think about, again, when we started at the top of the call, like, why was that goal important to you? What about that was good? And what I want to do today is give you permission for that goal to still be just as important as it was last year or on January 1st. And I also want to give you permission that just because you set a goal last year doesn't mean that goal has to remain the same this year. So I'll tell you a story. I had a client who set a really big goal for this year. And last year he had some health concerns and he kind of dug himself into a hole financially. So we spent all Q4 and Q1 working himself up, recovering, and he's now in a really good place. And we had a call last week and he said, Steph, that goal is just not important to me anymore. Like, I don't resonate with that at all, right? And he said, what I'm looking for is X, and we determined a new number that brought him, his word was like contentment and joy and peace, right? And so that was great for him. And so he decided to reforecast the goal. So I want you to think about that number that we talked about, that gap or that appointment number that we need to hit. And we're going to start to explore that a little bit. So what would 1 or 2 changes be that you would need to make that goal a reality? And just list those out. And oftentimes the first change that we think about isn't necessarily like the biggest one, right? So just brain dump, what would 1 to 2 changes be that you would need to make so that your goal became a reality? And by the way, if you list these 1 to 2 changes, it's not a commitment that you have to do them, but what would need to happen to make that a reality? And then my next question to you is, what makes it worthwhile to make those changes? And let's then look at it from a different viewpoint. And if you didn't make those changes, what would you get? There might be some negatives, there might be some positives. So for instance, with that story I told you about my client, because he didn't make those changes, he got more time with his family, and he got to live a different day every day and day out. And for him, that was worth it. So if you didn't change, how would that impact you? And then these questions I'm asking you are all just reflection questions for you to kind of work on later too. You don't have to solve everything in just today's, maybe start to think about them in some quiet time. But the next one would be, what makes this goal meaningful enough to do the work necessary to accomplish it? And see, we're all at a point in the mid-year where we need to reset, maybe recharge a little bit, and decide if we're behind, which it sounds like a lot of us are in that same group. Do we step on the gas and figure out what we need to do to change? Or do we maybe adjust the destination? And for those of us who are ahead of the goal, right, or on pace, you get to decide, do I keep cruising and do what I'm doing? Or should I adjust the destination? And what would make that worthwhile? All right, so we're in this artist world. It's very introspective and reflective, right? So let's kind of pull back a little bit and just decide if there was one thing that I could do today, what first step I could do, whether it to be to make those changes or to adjust the destination, what step would I take today? And now you can take out your phones. And if you could, text one person. You can text me, but text someone to let them know what your step is and when you'd like to have that done by. Right? Maybe it's truly just, I'm going to plan 30 minutes and I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to think about this, right? Or I'm going to get together with my team and have a conversation around some of these questions, or my accountability partner, right? Or someone in the office that could help walk me through this. And maybe it's, I'm going to take a day or an afternoon and I'm going to recharge as well so that I can make those changes and feel really fueled up about that. And then if I can just encourage one other thing, it would be to get your reflection time in your calendar before the end of the day so that you can start to think about some of these things. All right, so remember, we've got that engineer side, that math, that numbers, right? And then that artist side about tying this all together to your bigger why, because we're all in this business so that we can fuel our perfect life. And that vision of what that perfect world is can change over time. And it can be different from the person sitting next to you too. All right. If you guys have any questions, you can throw them in the chat, or if Mandy, any questions or ahas that people have, we can go through those too. Let's just get 2 ahas and like make something up so I don't feel terrible, right? So I don't feel bad if you don't have anything.
Janine.
I need to set some time for myself for reflection.
Janine needs to set some time for herself for reflection.
Thank you, Seth.
And she says,
Love
thank
that.
you.
Mhm.
One more,
All right,
guys.
one more.
I will talk. Although my business is down, I was able to identify a lot of great wins that normally I wouldn't identify. So I think that was like little wins are good to reflect on. So thanks, Steph.
Awesome. As Kathy Shaw says, crumbs make cake, right? So these little wins build up and can be like turned into something really great. Okay, Kathy, it looks like you've got one aha too.
There is still time, she says.
Oh, perfect. Love it.
I
Yep,
just
there-
want to say thank you, Steph, because it does feel overwhelming at times, but we have time left this year. And so foot on the gas pedal, we got this. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Love that. Awesome. Thanks for sharing your ahas. If you need anything, you know where to find me. And thanks, Mandy, for your talk show today.
Thank you, Steph. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in this morning. I had a lot of fun, but I also think it's really good for my children's future that I have a day job. What do you mean? Yeah. A huge thank you to our guests. And until next time, I am signing off. Mornings for Mandy. Have a great day, everybody.